In for 5 minutes. Mr. Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member and my colleagues for such bipartisan work here, and thank you to the staff as well. Thank you to you, Mr. Rowe. I appreciate what you've been doing and how you've been cooperating with us and the work that you've done at the Secret Service as well. I did want to follow up on Representative Houlihan's questions about drones. I do appreciate the fact that you've addressed many of the issues with respect to the failures that occurred on that day. But I do want to be mindful of making sure we're not just fighting the last battle, and we're looking ahead to the future, as Ms. Houlihan suggested as well. And I don't know that I want you to answer what I'm about to ask you, at least not in open session, but on October 7th, Hamas used drones to attack, actually to launch its attack against Israel. The drones appeared to me, and based on what I've seen in videos, to be relatively unsophisticated, relatively inexpensive, but very effective in carrying out that mission so that Hamas could breach Israel's front line and commit the attack that occurred later that day. And we've also seen what's happened with Russia and Ukraine with respect to the use of drones too. And frankly, we were seeing this before July 13th, pretty extensively, I think. So one of the things I want to ask, use of drones for that day, I know we've talked about the visibility piece, I think was your word, reconnaissance and the like. But I want to hear from you, maybe not in public, but maybe in executive session, about the countermeasures that are available to the Secret Service to deal with drones that are used to actually conduct the attack. So not just sending information back, but as we saw on October 7th, could actually carry, for example, an explosive device that could be used on that day. Now, I know Chairman Green with Homeland Security, you've heard the passion he brings to this and the background that he has, and he's right, we did have a hearing on this at Homeland Security, not just that issue. And I know this task force dissolves, I think, at the end of next week, but I'm hoping that we'll carry forward with this issue, and there are others too. I want to ask you quickly about the radio communications piece, because I know that wasn't, at least some of it wasn't recorded, which surprised me as a local prosecutor, federal prosecutor. The police recorded almost all of their radio communications just as a matter of course. And that was useful to us from a couple of standpoints. One was for prosecution of cases. We'd have actual live time recordings that we could use that we could present to a jury that confirmed the testimony that may have been provided to the jury at that time. But also from a management standpoint, you can go back and listen. And that's one of the first things I asked when we got this, the information was, where are the radio communications? I want to hear what happened that day. Now, we had to settle for, the email communications and the like, the text messaging, the sort of things people did on an ad hoc basis to deal with the emergency in a quick way. I thought that was insufficient. And it seems to me that you should be recording these just as a matter of course for the reasons I stated. Body cams is another one to think about, I would say. I know that can be expensive in a way that radio communications are not, but also extremely valuable in the prosecution of the cases. You've got, there's nothing to prosecute with respect to July 13th, but there is with respect to Mar-a-Lago, and I don't know what the evidence there is, but that's the type of information that could be useful. And then with my last minute, I wanted to pick up on what Representative Lee raised a moment ago. This isn't really to you, actually. This is to my former colleagues at the Department of Justice. I recognize that in ongoing criminal investigations, there's a reluctance to turn over information too soon because it can undermine the investigation. You can tip off defendants and targets and the like. So you want to be careful about that, and I understand that. But I must say, too, that there's some information that we didn't get, and she outlined some of that didn't seem to be connected to an ongoing criminal investigation, and I thought that we should have had access to that. And I'll note this as well. I've done some previous investigations, the Whitewater hearings, for example, when I was a staffer many years ago, where we were able to communicate with the independent counsel on an ongoing basis. And we did that in the wake of the Iran-Contra disaster, where they immunized Ali North, compelled him to testify. Department of Justice then ended up having to dismiss the case. It was thrown out of court because of the information sharing that took place. But even in the wake of that, Congress was able to work with the independent counsel, and it can with the Department of Justice, in making sure that we get the information that we need to handle these kinds of situations, because this is about as serious as it gets from the standpoint of what we're tasked to do. This is extremely important work. We would need to make sure that our elections are controlled by ballots and not bullets, and this was relevant here. But thank you for what you've done and the work you've continued to do, the direction you're taking the Secret Service in. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to run over, and I thank all of you, all my colleagues here and the staff again for the outstanding bipartisan work that you've been able to do.
Thank you, Mr. Ivey. Now we recognize Mr. Fallon from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the work that you and Ranking Member Rowe and the rest of the committee has done, and certainly our staff. Mr. Rowe, would you agree that the protection that President Trump was provided on the 13th of July was wholly and tragically neglected